لأمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Dear viewers and panelists, Assalamu alaikum to you all, and welcome to tonight's panel discussion brought to you by the KSIJ DAR COVID-19 response team in collaboration with the Central Board of Education KSIJ. Tonight's panel discussion is on distance learning, the education challenges and the way forward. And I'm very happy to tell you that this evening we have got some amazing panelists for everyone. If you permit me to introduce all the panelists one by one, I would like to start with Mrs. Fatima Haji. Mrs. Fatima Haji is an elementary school teacher at the International School of Tanganyika. She teaches grade 3, and she is a mother of 3 children. She has got a child in grade 5, a child in grade 3, and a child in grade 1. So, Mrs. Fatima, welcome to the presentation and the discussion for tonight. Next up, we have Mrs. Ismat Sharif. Mrs. Ismat is actually a secondary school teacher at the Dar es Salaam International Academy. She teaches the MYP and IB diploma program, where she teaches the individuals and societies social studies at the MYP level, as well as geography at the IB diploma program. Third, we have Mrs. Sandeep Kaur. Mrs. Sandeep is the deputy principal for the upper primary school from grade 4 to grade 7 for Al Muntazir Girls Primary. She has been teaching at Al Muntazir for the last 13 years, and she has got extensive teaching experience. Last up for tonight's panel discussion, we have Mrs. Zainab Parpia, who is also a deputy principal for the upper primary school from grade 4 to 7, but she is from the Al Muntazir Boys Primary School. And in fact, Mrs. Zainab has also been a student on the online learning platforms, as she has been actually pursuing and has recently completed her Bachelor's of Commerce over the last 5 years. She has been studying online. So tonight's panel is going to be a very interesting discussion. We have got very good, very reputable education industry players, teachers and principals. But not only are they teachers and principals, but they're also parents and they're also students, because obviously they have over the last 2 months. And in the case of Mrs. Zainab, she herself is a student of the online learning platforms. So I would like to welcome all of you panelists for tonight's discussion. Karibu sana.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The last 2 months have been a roller coaster ride for everybody who is in the education sector, because we were suddenly told that we need to shut down schools in order to prevent the spread of the COVID-19 coronavirus. And it has been a massive leap overnight. We have had teachers having to adapt to the online education systems. We have had students who have had to adapt to the online learning system, as well as parents. And from going from face to face into online and distance learning has been a tremendous change in the education sector in Tanzania, which is overnight. And I would like to start up with Mrs. Sandeep, if she can actually talk to us about this change. How have students been able to actually change and adapt overnight to this new mode of learning? And what has been the impact to students, parents, and teachers? Mrs. Sandeep, can you please enlighten us, please?
Yes, Mr. Muzahir. Thank you very much. I'll start with the teachers first. We all are teachers here. We love connecting with the students face to face. We love to engage them. We love to involve them. We love to see that expression in their eyes, when that light bulb moment, when we can actually understand that, yes, they've understood what we were teaching them. Now, when all of a sudden we had to change this method of teaching, we took it up as a challenge. Most of us as teachers, we have evolved with this, because we are teaching by remote now. We had to learn ourselves again. We went back into micro teaching, into our little department, so that we can support each other. We can train each other as to how to give our presentations, how to do our the worksheet content, because it cannot be as if you're delivering in a classroom, because our classroom now is a remote classroom. We are not so close to the children so that we can see whether the learning which we have given to them has been having a proper impact or not. So this situation was almost like, pushing us into a swimming pool. And then, yes, we all learned to swim. And also we had those students as well, who could not connect on e-learning. So we had to find ways of connecting to those students as well. So that was another, it was a challenge, and we have adapted very well with that. Now, if I come to the parents, as you have mentioned, the parents were very worried. They needed assurances from us. They needed to know that we were supporting them. The children were a little overwhelmed earlier on, but I think the children took it up very, very well, because for the students, it is like they are better than us adults at being online in the social media. They adapted to it beautifully. They actually were more excited than us. It was the parents, it was the teachers, it was the exam classes, for example, the grade 7s, the form 4s, the form 6, who had more of a challenge for for the teachers as well as the parents. That is where the concern came. I think overall it has been, yes, some challenges here and there, but most of us have adapted quite well, including the teachers and the parents and the students.
Right. So when we talk about teaching online, we have obviously a huge age group to talk about. We have kids from nursery, primary, secondary. You have your upper secondary or lower secondary, and we need to discuss, is the method of distance learning the same for all of these students? Mrs. Fatima, you're elementary teacher at IST. Maybe you can shed some light on the different teaching methods for older and younger children, and particularly how younger children have been able to cope with this scenario.
Thanks. Salam alaikum. Thank you for joining us and the opportunity to be here today. Just as a disclaimer before I start, I don't have all the right answers. I'm still learning myself. And as Mrs. Sandeep said, it's been a roller coaster ride for the teachers, the students, and the parents. I think I'll address the younger ones, elementary, upper, and lower. I think the biggest challenge has been, how can you get a child to sit on Zoom or on that online platform for that amount of time? I mean, as adults, how many times do we stand up to go and get a cup of coffee and, have a chat? It's just not normal. So it's been a few weeks of getting them used to this new normal where you're going to sit there and you're going to watch this screen for that long, especially coming from an environment where a lot of us were telling the kids, no screen time, you shouldn't be on the computer so much. And now suddenly we're saying you need to be sitting there for an hour. So it's been very challenging in that respect. I think with the lower ones, it's been important to ensure that the Zoom sessions or the online sessions, like with the teachers, are shorter, that they're having more breaks where they can go and have a bit of movement and then come back. And also, I think we've been encouraging the value of hands-on experiences that the kids are having at home. We've encouraged kids, go outside, play in the garden, plant whatever it is that you want to plant. You'll probably get more out of that than coming online and sitting there and watching a video for 10 minutes. So I think parents have understood the value of these experiences as well, especially with the younger kids. I think the other point that I'd like to make is, with the younger children, it has had to fall a bit more on the parents to take the lead. You're switching it on for them. You're having to say, sit there. You're having to show them the activity. And for the really little ones, you're having to do the activity with them. So I think that's the biggest difference. The older kids are probably more independent, but I think Ismat would be better off talking about that.
Mrs. Ismat, would you like to probably step in and talk about the older kids? Maybe you can share some light with the secondary kids.
Yeah, Once again, thank you for being here. And yeah, I concur with Fatima that for younger kids, definitely it has been a lot more hands-on for parents at home. And this is especially a challenge for working parents who also may be doing their own work from home or may also have their own responsibilities that they still need to take care of. In our context here, we are used to having support at home and help, which we are also doing without right now. So it's a lot more responsibilities, and then is one more that you need to take care of. So with secondary students, it's been a little bit easier in that they are, like Mr. Sandeep said, they're very excited about being online, and now they have a reason to be online. And mom and dad can't say, get off the screen. You're sitting on the screen for too long. So but at the same time, I think the challenge for secondary students has been to organize their time. So to be able to complete the tasks that they do need to do in that period of 1 week that they're assigned. So multiple subjects would assign different tasks, and then they need to plan their own time, and that needs a certain level of organization. So suddenly they've needed to be a lot more independent in thinking about themselves and what they're doing and when they're doing it, and are they going to meet all those deadlines on time. And then the other thing that I've really been pushing is for them to be thoughtful about how they are breaking up their day. Because, it's very easy to sit in front of a screen for 8 hours in a day and say that you're working. But really, after 45 minutes, which is your attention span, or an hour, you're not that anymore. So you need to get up and you need to go and do something else, even if it is to walk around the house and have a chat with a parent or a grandparent or whoever's at home with you, and then come back, feel a little bit refreshed, and start another mode or another subject. So there's different ways to manage that. So timetabling has been the biggest thing, learning curve for students in terms of self-discipline. I think the other thing to mention here is that there's a huge divide in terms of internet access and access to tablets and computers, and it depends on how many there are available at home. If you have multiple siblings in your household and everybody needs to be online, there's that process of sharing and consideration, and it makes it that much more challenging.
Mrs. Asmat, you talked about learning curve, and on the onset, Mrs. Sandeep also talked about teachers having to get into training and retraining themselves, because obviously teachers have always been teaching on a face-to-face medium. Suddenly you're told you can't see the student, you need to go on this cloud-based, virtual-based system and actually teach. I was hoping Mrs. Zainab can probably share some light on teacher training. How has teacher training been happening, especially since you're more of a higher level as a vice principal? How has the teacher training been going on, and the adoption of e-learning by the teachers?
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, brother Zahir. So e-learning, distance learning has been around for quite some time now. It's just that this past 2 months, it's become more central to the whole teaching, learning experience globally. So it is a good time for institutions like schools, universities to look into training the teachers. So here, I mean, like not having the best technology on your campus, but how to integrate that technology into your teaching. So first, you would like to maybe just survey how many teachers within your institution are well versed with the technology that is available. And then after that is when you can assess and put up workshops that would then cater to those who need the extra training. So, for example, there are those teachers who who've not been very familiar with like these online sessions like Skype, Zoom. So, and there are those who are able to do them very well because for social calls, people use these platforms very often. So you could use those teachers who know these platforms very well to train those who are struggling with that, and that could be your internal training. And another thing that you can do and that would help teachers train for this integration is like attending webinars. We have global providers such as Oxford, Cambridge. They do a lot of webinars where they show how to use digital media like ebooks, textbooks, and screen share on the Zoom session to make the learning more interactive, and then that can add on to their final outcome of getting the learning across. And adoption for e-learning, of course, requires teachers to stretch outside their comfort zone because they've never done this before. Like Mrs. Sandeep said, it's like pushing us into a pool and okay, you have to swim. So we have to give them time to learn and work with this new technology. Once they have gained confidence in using these mediums, the opportunities are endless, because for teachers, it's like giving us a new tool and saying, okay, here is something new and it's going to open like a lot of doors for your children in learning. So we will ensure that we make the best of it, and we can look at different ways of tackling assignments. So instead of written based, theory papers and all, you could ask students to maybe do and submit that. So that integrates learning into a whole new experience, and they look forward to it, both the teachers and the students.
I mean, obviously, with the last couple of months worldwide, there has been an explosion of interest in e-learning because of necessity. And they say that necessity is the mother of invention. Necessity is the mother of invention. I remember reading an article which says that Zoom used to have a handful of few million users, and that number exploded over the last 2 to 3 months. Mrs. Ismat, maybe you can share with us what are the online learning platforms and e-learning platforms, as well as the resources that are available for students that can be used for by teachers. Sorry, I think your mic is off.
Okay. Out there that sometimes it's just purely confusing, even as teachers, with the number of different platforms we have coming at us. It just takes a little bit of time for us to weed through and decide, okay, I'm going to use this and this and this. So Zoom itself, for example, has so many features. The screen share allows you to do to make presentations so that there's a form of blended learning. You can play YouTube videos for students on screen share. You can also open up a whiteboard on Zoom and allow students to write on it so that people can collaborate. Zoom has the additional feature of breakout rooms, so you can actually put students into discussion groups. And in this way, it brings about more student engagement. So even Zoom itself has so many features that need exploring. And then Google has a whole host of platforms, including Google Classroom, where you can assign tasks and receive them and give feedback. And it's very easily and very nicely manageable for teachers. Google Forms you can also do quizzes with, where you can put in the answers and the form will actually mark it for you. There's Kahoot, which we've seen an explosion of in Dar es Salaam in particular. It's a favorite. There's Screencast and Loom, which teachers can use to make videos, which then students can watch at their own time. So if something is confusing, then you can go back and you can watch the concept again, and you can then answer a Google form based on the video, so that the teacher gets to know how much of it you've retained. There's like Sister Zainab said, ask students to do project-based tasks. Flipgrid is really good for that. It allows students to quickly record videos of what they've learned and post them, and students in one class can see each other's and comment on each other's. So it gives them that sense of being with their peers, even though they're not actually with their peers. Ed Puzzle is another one of my favorites. You can put on a YouTube video on Ed Puzzle, and periodically as the video plays, you can pause it and ask a question which the student has to answer before they can move on. And so you're checking understanding as they're going ahead. Edmodo is another one students can comment on. Meeting platforms, Google Meet. Another one that I like is classtools.net. And on class tools, you can make crosswords, you can make all sorts of visual learning tools that you can then send out to students. So that's some of the platforms of the many that are out there. The other thing in terms of resource, actually really lucky that education institutions have been very open at this time. And suddenly things that you needed to pay for are now free over this period of COVID. So we really, really should take advantage of that. In Thinking is a great one for secondary. It has all the subjects and you can go in and lesson plans are created and they're very interactive activities. So In Thinking is free right now. iExcel is another one and it's an easy one to test math and language and social studies skills with. Personally, for support as a teacher, especially for the diploma program, Facebook has some teacher support groups. And when you join those, then you get to learn so much about what other teachers are doing globally in your subject. So these are resources that are catered for your subject. In addition, there are articles and all sorts of material that you can then pass on to students. So these are some of the resources and some of the platforms that are available at the moment for teachers to use. And I'm sure I've only touched on a fraction of what is out there. Oh, another really nice one to check out is Padlet. And what Padlet allows you to do is create a wall on which students can post. So they can post pictures or they can post their comments on different questions, and then they can respond to each other. So the more collaborative and engaging the platforms are that we can use, then we can try and create that classroom ethos the best that we can online.
But Mrs. Ismat,
Yeah.
if you mind elaborating on the platforms that you have mentioned are just so many. Do
Yeah.
you feel that maybe using too many platforms or using too few platforms could either extreme could confuse the kids and probably hinder the e-learning process?
So what I say is these days their brains are wired very differently from ours. You'll be amazed at how quickly these kids pick up just the variety of platforms that you can throw at them, and they just do it so naturally. So yes, it is possible that it could cause confusion. So I wouldn't do all of them, or I wouldn't use all of them at once. But over time, you can introduce one like every 2 weeks or so, and you don't have to be like, today I have to introduce a platform. You use it when it fits the need that you have. So one that I didn't mention is Nearpod, and Nearpod allows you to do timed testing, which is something that we struggle with in this time period. Like, how do we test students, So whatever fits the need the best, I would at this point not worry about students getting confused because they're really wired differently.
Right. Okay. But Mrs. Sandeep, we've talked about all these different e-learning platforms, Zoom, Edmodo, and so on and so forth. The couple of questions that actually come very key is that how effective are these platforms in actually delivering the education to the students, and how are you evaluating success of these sessions, these virtual classes that we are having? How can you evaluate their success?
Okay, Mrs. Ismat has given a list, and it depends on also the age level of and the class, the grade level of the students of what we are able to work on effectively with. And like your question is whether it is how to evaluate the students. Now, the evaluation would be based on When we are teaching, there is a certain outline from where we are teaching from. So when a topic is taught, for example, their worksheets given, their presentations given, and there is a feedback which has to come back from the students based on those assignments which they have to submit. So when those assignments are brought back, then you are grading them. That is where the feedback comes from, whether the lesson which was taught has been effectively understood, has been taught to, because the teaching is changing right now. The teaching is not, I'm just standing there and delivering. It doesn't work like that anymore in remote learning or in e-learning. It has to be, we have to make sure that the quantity of the quantity and the quality is both matched appropriately of that particular topic which has to be taken up during the lesson. Another thing which which it goes a long way in making sure that it is done in a better way is to monitor. There has to be always a vetting, a team which is monitoring the resources which go online. There is a team which has to see whether the presentations which go online are appropriate or not appropriate, whether it will be effective, or would it just be there and the child would not benefit much, because there is always a gap between a face-to-face and e-learning, right? And also when we get the feedback from the students, what are we doing with that feedback? Are we just leaving and putting it aside, or we are actually working on that feedback and going the next step? So the next lesson or the lesson the next week would be based on the feedback that has been received from the students. So all that goes a long way in making sure that that we are doing the learning is being done in the way it is supposed to be done on the e-platform. Have I answered your question that way?
Yes, I believe you have. And actually, this brings me to a very interesting discussion as well. We mentioned earlier that we cannot expect kids to sit in front of the TV or the laptop for 6, 7, 8 hours, at one go. We need to get them to stand up, move around, and Mrs. Fatima, you earlier mentioned that sometimes the elementary or the lower primary as well as the younger kids might have a bigger challenge with this. How do we handle kids or children who do not like to sit on the computer to attend the online sessions? Should parents be, standing over them with a stick or something, ready to whack them in case they misbehave or are not attending the online sessions? Maybe you can elaborate on those.
Okay. That's a really good question. And the biggest thing that I would like to say is we don't force the kids to do things that they don't want to do, because the quality of what they produce isn't going to be the level that we want anyway. So you force a kid to do a particular assignment. I'm talking even the upper elementary. If they've been forced to do it, even in the classroom when we were with them, we know that the quality and the amount of effort that child will have put in is much less. So it's never a case of forcing. We try and use the words, I'm going to persuade you, I'm going to encourage them. I think the biggest thing that we've been lucky about is that if you look at when this crisis happened, it was towards the end of the academic year. So we as teachers already had the chance to make that relationship with the kids for the last few months before we went into this crisis. So as a teacher, I know which kids in my class I can entice using this app or this story or this comment, and suddenly you have that child sitting. So we've already got that relationship as teachers. And as parents, you have your, come on, I know you want to do this, I'm going to let you do it if you sit. So I think we all have these tricks up our sleeves that we can pull out, and this is the time to do it. I think some of the big things that I'd like to follow up on, Ismat mentioned quite a few platforms. The idea with throwing out these platforms is to keep those kids coming, keep those kids sitting in our sessions. If I'm going to do the same Zoom lesson using the same flip chart or the same Padlet every week, they're going to stop doing it. But if in 2 weeks' time they suddenly see something new pop up, or it looks different, or suddenly I know I've used Bitmoji a lot, which I never knew existed, but I now use like religiously, because suddenly that's exciting enough to get those kids reading or watching what I've put up. So it's a case of finding the right way to entice the kid. I think lastly, what I would say to answer that question is, it's not the end of the world if the child doesn't show up for that Zoom session. I'm not going to stand there with a stick. I'm not going to force them to come. I'm going to encourage, but if it doesn't happen, it's not worth that day, because remember, as a parent, I'm now stuck with that kid at home with that mood for the rest of the day. It's not going to work. So I think you've got to, as a parent, again, you're juggling, is this the right time to push it, or am I just going to step back and this one's a miss and that's okay? I hope that answers your question.
It does, but I would like Mrs. Isma to also contribute to this discussion, because I think this is a hot issue that we're on. How can we get students engaged? How can teachers get students engaged? How can parents get students engaged? The challenge of student engagement is one of the biggest challenge in e-learning. Mrs. Isma, maybe you can share some light from your experience.
Yeah, so it's a little bit of a different animal with secondary students, because you do need them to sit down and you do need them to listen, because you're delivering content that you need them to get, right? And sometimes you don't succeed, and and it is what it is. They'll catch up, but yes, student engagement is definitely it's definitely difficult. Using different platforms works for older kids also. Having built a relationship, I think, is the main thing. I think the thing that keeps them coming back, or keeps them wanting to do the work, is if they believe that you are genuinely interested in being there, teaching them, and getting them to understand what you're trying to teach them. And that involves how you run your class, how you plan your assignments. So if you're doing an online session, you need that touch of, when you start the session, you can't go straight into the content. We have that human touch when we see students at school. We ask them how they are, how they're doing. If they're not feeling that great, we can tell immediately. So check in on them, even if they are, even if it is online. Do check in on students, and as soon as they feel seen and heard and valued, that in itself is a reason why they may come back to your class more often. Like secondary students are very much the same to primary students, in the sense that different things spark interest. So whatever topic you may be talking about, try to pull in the angle that what would interest the students. If the student is interested in sciences in particular, find the science angle to your topic. If they're interested in arts, find the arts angle to your topic. So whatever it is that you can spark in discussion, because if you can get them to engage and they're thinking about things, and they're having fun to a certain extent, even if it's not the same, then they'll keep coming back. But if it's very dry and they're kind of just sitting there and listening to you talk for a very long time, then most likely they're not going to want to sign on and stay there for that amount of time that you want them to.
Okay, that's great insight. Viewers, if you have any questions, just type it in the chat box on the YouTube page, and we will make sure to ask our panelists any questions that you may have that is relevant to the discussion. Mrs. Zainab, we talked about the change of pace from a face-to-face interaction to an online interaction, and Mrs. Ismat actually just shared with us, when you see the kids physically, you can judge their emotions better, you have that connection with them, the connection is stronger. Can you share with us some of the challenges involved with the lack of physical presence, that physical connection? Can you share with us any challenges that has brought about to teaching and learning?
Yes, that is one of the biggest things that e-learning has still to fill the gap So basically, in distance learning, it's more of a student-centered approach because the child is responsible for his learning independently. So they have to like make sure they are ready to learn. When they have their sessions going on, they have to have the drive, to sign in. And nobody should like tell them, the parents don't have to constantly remind them to sort of, okay, you have this class at this time, this class at this time. For independent learners, it works okay, but for dependent learners, like the primary students or the nursery students, the lack of physical presence is a big challenge because it's difficult for them to learn. They need someone to be around them, to explain things to them, to be a little more one-on-one. So even if they're making a mistake, the teacher is able to correct them. Like in a physical classroom, the teacher is taking cues if the child is very quiet suddenly, or if the child is, nodding their head. So that means like, okay, they're understanding the concept. So that aspect of connecting with the child is like the biggest gap that is there in the lack of physical presence in the e-learning platform.
Mrs. Ismat, would you like to add something on this?
Yeah, so I think the other thing that I would have added is at this point, it's something that parents can do, and maintaining a balance at home for kids is very, very important. That they're getting enough sleep, that they're eating right, they're eating balanced meals, that they're getting some physical exercise. I know we're all at home, but we can still go out on walks. They can still go out for a bicycle ride, or if you have any equipment at home, even if you don't, you can do like jump rope, skipping competition in the house, or but something or the other. That physical activity is very, very important, and our younger students tend to be very physical anyway, so it's okay, they're running around. And but our older students are not always that they are not always maintaining that balance so well, and that really has an impact on their concentration engage online.
I can see that the theme has sort of taken a turn towards increased parental involvement in e-learning versus, the traditional school model where the parent knows that, the kid is at school, he's been taken care of for a larger degree by the teachers who have been doing an amazing job as always. Uh, so with this e-learning, a lot of parents have had a lot of challenges. Mrs. Sandeep, maybe you can highlight some of the challenges faced by parents. Those should not go unnoticed in the quest for e-learning.
Yes, as you mentioned, we have placed the parents out of their comfort. We're used to what they learned, how they learned when they was at school. So basically, it's like a culture shock of sorts for the parents as well. It's like a 180. Earlier on it was more of a lecture approach, what they are used to. Right now, it's a child-centered approach of learning. Having said that, there are a lot of challenges. There are very practical challenges which the parents are facing. What we come across when we are dealing, as we gradually, these last 2 months, major challenge which comes is from the working parents, when they are not at home, when they are not able to monitor the screen time, because the complaint is the screen time has suddenly increased. So here is e-learning, which involves a lot of internet usage where the parent is at work. So that is the anxiety for a parent. That's the stress level of a parent as well. Then there is a single parent who has nobody else to fall back on. So that parent has gone to work, and that is a challenge. And who is going to monitor the child at home with e-learning? There is another point somebody raised was, suppose a parent has lost his or her job because of this situation. Then what do you do? Because that is another stress we are adding on to that. Another factor is, for example, if there are more than one child in the family, like, there's a high school child, there's a middle school child, and there's one. So everybody needs some kind of level of e-learning. But then here the priority is given to the eldest one, because he or she is in high school. His career depends on that. So the children who are in either the middle school or younger will be they will have to compromise somewhere. Then suppose there is the cost factor of internet. That is also one of the. Then the connectivity part, like I know suddenly I went offline, that was the connectivity. So if it is a lesson going on and then suddenly the internet goes away, then yes, that is one of the challenges there. Then what else? Another thing is, when I as a parent have been used to a certain way of learning, so I would teach my child according to that, but my child is not used to learning from that way. Teaching has evolved, learning has evolved, but I as a parent, I did not learn in a certain way. So that sometimes overwhelms the parent, because the child is there throughout the day. The child is used to learning in a certain way. So as Mrs. Ismat said, the child sometimes reacts. Mrs. Fatima also, sometimes the child is made to do something. I mean, even just planting a seedling. So as a teacher, we would teach that in a different way. But a parent would say, okay, take this bean and put it in a sprout. I mean, that is, it's a very simplistic example of the difference in how we teach and how the expectation, So that is, and then yes, some parents are unable to go on the e-learning platform. They request for worksheets, for example. Now, the cost of printing those worksheets is again a challenge which has been repeatedly brought up by the parents. I mean, these are just tiny little things, but then to add on to the whole thing, it does become a challenge for parents, right? I mean, though it's not so negative as I'm listing down all the challenges which the parents will be facing, but yes, they are. Some families do face more challenges than the other.
Mrs. Fatima, you have 3 kids, and you told me that one is in grade 5 and one is in grade 3 and the other one is in grade 1. As a parent, what do you think is the best thing that you can do to help your children during this period for students who are in the primary and elementary school level?
I'm glad you brought this question to me next, because as Mrs. Sandeep was talking, for every one of those challenges, I was like, yep, tick, I've done that. Yes, we've had that at home. I mean, if you think about it, we're most of the time in our house fighting for space right next to that hub of that internet, because there's 4 of us wanting to get onto this device at the same time, and all of us want it to be as clear as possible. So there's me, and then there's the 3 of them. So just with that, it's a big challenge and a big fight. And then also it's, well, your Zoom call is too loud and I need to hear my teacher. So just in my house alone, I see it. The other point that you raised that resonated with me really well is I used to hear a lot, and I think Ismat will agree, is a lot of the parents say, well, you're a teacher, you can teach your own kid. Well, it's great. You all know how to do it now, so you know why I don't teach my own kids. But jokes aside, I think as a parent, the biggest thing that I can say that I try and give my parents, and I push the parents in my class to do for the kids, is positive reinforcement. You get up in the morning, you start that day, you know it's going to be a tough day, but if you start it off with that positive mindset, that child is going to have that mindset. They're going to grow through the day. They're going to go through the activities through the day, knowing that they can do it. If they're going to start the day with, oh my God, we've got so much to get through and we're not going to do it, that day is just, you might as well wrap it up and put it away. So I think the positive mindset is super important. Going back to what Ismat said in terms of a routine, it's lovely to have a routine in your house for all the kids. Yes, their lunch times are all different and people are snacking at different times because they're all on different phone calls. But to get them into a routine of, you get up at this time, and I think now that Ramadan is coming to an end, it is going to be easier to put these kids back into sort of a school time routine. If you can manage to do that, you'll realize that your kids' self-management skills are growing. I mean, I'll be honest, looking at my own kids, I'm like a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old managing their own little schedule of, I can only go and do this once I finish these assignments, means they're growing with a skill that they will take forever. That is not something that you teach out of a textbook. That's a life skill. So whatever you're doing as a parent, and sometimes you're thinking, gosh, today was a really hard day and he didn't do this many activities that he was supposed to do. But if he learned a life skill that's going to stay with him forever, he can probably apply that across the board. So I think, to summarize, we've got to realize that if we focus on the positives, be patient, right? And the kids will realize and take that on and be patient with us too. And give them time. I know it's not easy, but those few 20 minutes that you get to have like that quick conversation with your kid, make sure it's a positive. End with, I know you've got this. I know you can figure out the area of a triangle. Just try again. You know, that positive stays with them for the rest of the day. So I think that's my kind of advice. I guess the other thing that I'd like to point out here is we've always taught for a future that we don't know. And now more than ever, we are teaching kids or preparing them for a future. We don't even know what that looks like, right? Are they still going to be teachers 10 years down the line? Are we going to have, in the past, it used to be my child is going to school, they're going to study, they're going to become so and so. But today, we don't know what jobs are going to be there. So I think we need to, as educators, as parents, sort of begin to focus on how can I make my child the best human being that they can be. And if we focus on that as teachers, giving them the skills, and as parents, throwing in that patience is important, being caring is important, helping your sibling out is important. Those are qualities that they will take in whatever job that they go and do.
Mrs. Ismat, would you have the same advice for parents of kids who are in the secondary or IB or A levels as well?
You're muted, Ismat.
Yeah, along the same lines, I would say that for kids in secondary, balance is really the key. So you start off with routine, like Fatima has said. Routine places everything in context, and when you know what you're meant to be doing throughout the day, it just helps to settle yourself down. It helps to calm you down. You stop teenagers from walking around aimlessly around the house, not knowing what they should be doing next. If they've had enough sleep, they've eaten well, they've had some exercise, they're overall, they're just having a more healthy outlook and a more positive outlook towards their work. They're going to be able to get more done. They're going to be able to study better. There's a lot of stress right now for A levels and DP students especially, and university students as well that are now working from home and are having to sit exams. So institutions need to be thoughtful that yes, we do need to assess, but there is high levels of stress right now. There may be parents at home, like Ms. Sandeep said, who may have lost a job. God forbid, there may be families who are affected by the virus itself, and that in itself is a very stressful situation. Having to study and then sit exams on top of that, not having necessarily the right internet at home or the right space to work in or the right environment to do your studies in, it really brings a lot of things to head. So for secondary school students, you do need to have a lot of patience, understanding, to give them a listening ear at this time. Their mental health is really important, that they're keeping they're keeping positive and they have sound mental health, they have someone to talk to, they need to be chatting with their friends as well. So yes, they should do Zoom calls with their friends. They should keep in contact with their friends, because that's an avenue that is suddenly taken away from them. Older kids tend to orient their lives around their friends and what's going on in their lives. So suddenly that contact is not there, and they don't have an avenue to release their stress. So I would say that for secondary students, scheduling, balanced diet, healthy sleep schedule, a focus on the mental health, having checking in on them, giving them an opportunity and someone to talk to, encouraging them to keep in touch with their friends. All of these things are very important at this time, in addition to everything they have to do for school. I think once you get to the secondary school level, especially A levels, they're already aware of the amount of work that needs to be done and that they must get it done, because at some point or another they're going to have to sit those exams, and they're going to be assessed on them. So for most kids, that thought or that engagement, that level of pressure is already there that pushes them to do the work. So it's these other areas of sort of softer support that need to be provided to keep them going over this period of time, because it can be really exhausting.
You talked about balanced diet. Ramadan and balanced diet, I don't know, it just doesn't go together. You have all the sambusas and kebabs and faludas and puddings.
Yes.
So it's quite difficult, but it's something that we all need to work on while we're working or learning from home. Is something we must not forget. Mrs.
So
Sandeep,
something I've
yes,
So
yes, please.
something that I would our kids from very early on is the 5 food groups, and to teach them to notice that, like, evaluate their own plate and see if all 5 food groups are represented. I've done that for my own kids, and for most of the time I can just say, I don't see everything on your plate, and they know like which one is missing and what they need to eat more of. So if we start early with that one, it really helps.
I hope my family is not watching this, otherwise they'll make me start using the 5 food groups. uh, Mrs. Sandeep, we actually have some interesting questions that have come on our YouTube chat, and this actually relates to challenges faced by students during the online learning or e-learning phase. And specifically, there's 2 questions that have really come up and really popped up that talk about. Uh, the challenge I face with online learning is teachers don't unmute at the right time. Asking questions or getting clarification is a huge challenge. Kudos to the person who asked this question. It's straight on the noggin. The other challenge that someone has talked about is the number of students that actually have access to computers and internet connectivity. Can you highlight for us challenges that students face during this time, and maybe some tips on how they can overcome these challenges?
Yeah, you've talked about 2 things. One is the how do you respond while the lesson. Let me present my challenge. The teachers faced a challenge of Zoom bombing there. Something which was covered with dark ink. I mean, you had to go clean it up very fast so that the lesson could continue. And then there was cyberbullying, which was happening as a result of the children not putting off their videos. I mean, that was part and parcel of e-learning, which the children. There was one lesson I remember. I just stopped the lesson. I had to talk to them about putting off your videos, please. Otherwise, I am blocking you all out. I mean, but then that was a threat which sometimes works most of the times, because you see the children are not in front of us. I cannot tell them, hi, please keep quiet. I can't see them, right? I just see the mess which is being created on the screen. But having said this, yes. And the second question about one you said was about the challenge, the response to the student, and the other you said was the challenge which they face.
Yeah, so one was when the teacher does not unmute the mics on time, so they can't ask questions, And the
Yes.
other one was, internet connectivity and computer access as
Yes.
one of the main challenges faced by students. Maybe you can highlight on these as well as other challenges that students may face.
Yes, yes. One is okay. Mrs. Ismat has elaborated very well on the independent learners. When they are at the higher level. What happens with the challenge most they're coming across is the ones who are, say, from grade 5 till, let's say, form 2, form 3, because they are still learning to be independent learners. Now when they are still learning, it is very easy for them to get overwhelmed. They get overwhelmed with there is a lot of things they're coming across. They're coming across the Zoom lessons, which they have to follow on time. And then fortunately or unfortunately, it was the month of Ramzan at the middle. So they were sleeping late. They were getting up. They had to get up on time to sit for the Zoom lessons. And I remember there was one student who had written, if the lesson is not going to be there, may I go back to sleep? Okay. So because, I totally understand that, right? So there's a lot of stress because of the number of lessons, the number of assignments that have to go home. Mrs. Isma talked about the mental health issue as well, because the child is isolated right now. The child doesn't have the peer support here. The child has only access to the teacher through either a study platform or through an interactive platform like Zoom. And you have a limited time on that platform where you have to do your presentation. You have to make sure that the lesson is gone across. You have explained the lesson, and you have posted the assignment. That's a limited time because you do not want to extend that screen time of the child. Now guiding the children, now another factor which comes here, which the children get disturbed about, and which Mrs. Ismat also was talking about, is the management, the time management, the self-discipline. So that aspect, the teachers, if we are talking on these on Edmodo, for example, we use Edmodo, we use Zoom. So we're talking to the children about that, and also how to make your schedule at home. You have your sleeping hours in place, you have your meal times in place. And yes, you have from this time 9 to say 1, you are on an e-learning platform. So make sure that there are no disturbances, for example. So all that helps, and then also to connect the children to their peer groups so that they don't feel so isolated. So those are
right. Yeah. So you talked about photo bombing, but the concern has always been about discipline on the e-platforms. Mrs. Zainab, can you highlight the discipline issues that teachers and students have faced, and maybe you can even talk about some kind of cyberbullying. Do you see any increase in cyberbullying taking place?
Okay, as I had mentioned earlier, the e-learning platform is very student-centered. So ability on the student, like Sister Isma and Sister Fatima pointed out, that the parents do play an important role to sort of oversee the children when they are on these platforms, and it happen all the time. So what does the child himself or herself need to have? What sort of qualities do they need to have in them, or grow into, so that they are positive on their e-learning platforms? So we could look at things like being self-motivated, so learning on your own. And then another thing that Sister Ismat had shared was being well organized, right? So that is a very important aspect of self-discipline on the e-learning platform. And communication is also very important, because here the teacher is relying only on the child to give feedback, whether they've understood the concept or not. You can't tell if the child has learned or not learned. You wait for them to speak up, and you have a lot of the children who usually don't speak up on these platforms because, again, of course, they might be worried about the cyberbullying, that if they do ask questions, their friends will tell them that, maybe they're slow learners or they don't understand fast enough. So that is something that needs to be spoken to the children, proper question, and it is okay. There is nothing to be ashamed of. And again, another very important thing is integrity and respect for your fellow learners and your teachers also. Because you do have that chat box option on the online, like Zoom or sessions, and you have students writing swear words, you have students annotating the screen and just scribbling all over the teacher's face, and you're like, okay, in the middle of the lesson, you're like, okay, now how do I go about this? So that sort of throws you a little off balance. So it's very important for students to have that sort of discipline in them and respect and integrity. And I think teachers can speak to the children, like we said, 5 minutes into the lesson, just have a one-on-one discussion, and tell them just the general guidelines of how they can be respectful towards each other and maintain positive environment in the learning platform. And another thing is, if the teacher is not online and they start chatting with each other, and they can be disrespectful. So another good thing that they can do, and parents can insist, is have some part of your lesson material ready. So in case there is a technical problem, teachers can't come online, they have something to work with, and instead of creating chaos, discipline issues, cyberbullying, they're actually engaged into doing that particular activity that has been set aside. So a good e-learner will have a backup plan, basically, because of course technical difficulties happen anywhere.
When we have technical difficulties, Mrs. Fatima, maybe you can share some of the resources that students can use by themselves to become more independent, and maybe parents can also use to get their kids to self-learn at home. I believe you have prepared some resources for us.
Yeah, so what I've done is, as a team, we've put together a page of links that you can go in and click on. I've tried to categorize them into subject areas or interest areas, as I'd like to call them. This PDF will be shared on social media and KSIJ DAR official channels. There are links that you can click on. So I think at the moment, even looking through some of the questions that you have on the chat, what we have to realize and be grateful for is this is temporary, right? We're going to go back to school and we have to live with that. This is not forever. So we don't need everything to be perfect at the moment. We have to be okay with things that the teachers sometimes get wrong because they're learning. We weren't trained for this. I was trained to go into school and meet my kids and do things with real people. That's why I became a teacher, and I miss that the most. All of the kids' comments have been that we miss our teachers, we miss our friends. So that social emotional piece that Ismat was talking about is key. And that's when parents come in. We need to make sure that the social emotional well-being of our kids is at the highest at the moment, as opposed to focusing on the other little bits that they can catch up in when they go back to school. So with these links, what I would encourage is, especially with summer holidays coming up and when the kids have a bit more time, find what your child is interested in. If your child is interested in, I don't know, solar power, let's look into that. Let's find the resources. And I'm sure from one of the links that I've put in there, you'll be able to find something. If your child is interested in football, I mean, trust me, you can quiz me now and I know everything there is to know about Messi and Barcelona. So, use that, do it. Get involved in your child's learning in that way. It'll be fun and the kids will enjoy it too, and they will gain something from it.
Mrs. Ismat, there is some concern about mental health and the mental well-being of students. Now, obviously, the KSIJ COVID team has a response line, and we also had a panel discussion a few days ago regarding the same.
Yes.
But do you have some specific tips for students and parents on how they can maintain their mental and emotional well-being during this time?
So I think the ones that I mentioned before, sleep, contact with your peers, routine, eating well, doing something for yourself in the day, managing your timetable with breaks in between, and not working throughout the whole day. So what tends to happen in this situation is, because we're at home all the time, there's no demarcation of what's work time and what's home time and what's family, it kind of all just blends into each other. So you need to have one part of your day where you are doing something for yourself. If you're watching a show that you like, that's fine. If you're just on WhatsApp chatting with your friends, that's okay, but you need to allow um, secondary students that time to do what they need to. They might be playing Minecraft for half an hour. They might be watching a football game, I don't know, playing FIFA online. Whatever it is that they need to do that somehow gives them a little bit of a break is also very, very important.
Mrs. Ismat, I think that one of the key areas that causes a lot of students and parents stress during this time is the assessments. How is my child going to be assessed? Will these marks count towards his final grade? What's how good is distant assessment? Maybe you can share some light on how kids are being assessed nowadays and how we can ensure fair and equitable assessment for students.
Yeah, so this is definitely a really challenging area, because academic integrity, for it to be maintained, we really at this point have to trust students to a great extent, or trust their parents in the work that they're doing. But I think for the whole education sector, it's an opportunity to look at how we do assessments. So if we do assessments that are project based, that require students to show their thinking, for example, Ms. Zainab mentioned have them make a video. It's hard for you to cheat when you have to make the video, right? And whatever what you authentically know will come out, and whatever you're parroting off will become known very, very quick of an assessment. So project-based assessments are really a key, I would say, the most authentic way of assessing at this point in time. Having said that, we do need to assess content, especially in secondary. So a platform like Nearpod allows you to put up your questions and put in a time block after which you get cut off. So you log in, you answer the questions, and then you get cut off. So even if you are going to check your books or you're going to go look for the answer, chances are you're not going to finish the test. So either way, it's going to balance out, and your abilities will become apparent. So looking at some of these platforms is one way, but overall in the education sector, to move to more project-based assessment or research-based tasks will be much more fruitful in the long run, because as students move on from secondary school into the real world, it's their research skills, it's their ability to communicate, it's their ability to think critically and creatively. It's their ability to make connections with people. These are the skills that are really, really important for the jobs that we don't know they're going to have.
So, Mrs. Zainab, I would like to ask you overall, the last 2 months has been a roller coaster ride. Have you seen any benefits from e-learning and distance learning? And do you think that e-learning has a room in the future of education?
Yes, definitely. The benefits are more than the challenges, of course. Again, depending on the kind of learners you're looking at. So the older secondary students are more benefiting from this than the younger ones. But empowering students, the e-learning, because they take responsibility for their own learning in a different number of ways. And another thing is there's flexibility. So you don't have to have like a strict routine. You can decide when you are ready to sit on your computer, take in the content, analyze it, do your assignments. So that flexibility is extremely important. Another thing is there's no hard and fast rules like there would be. So that kind of lessens the pressure. So that is a very good benefit of e-learning. And again, another thing that personally I have seen, because I have been learning on this platform for the past 5 years, is that you can revisit lectures, read through the content again and again and again, and watch videos, just so that you're able to grasp the context of what is being put out there for you. So yes, definitely, these are the e-learning, and I'm sure there's plenty more, because as time goes on and we incorporate e-learning into our classroom learning, because we know we're going to go back to school sometime, and this e-learning, like Sister Fatma said, is temporary. It's just to keep us going right now. We can incorporate it so that it complements our classroom learning in a very positive way, and it could be the next best thing that happened to us because of this situation.
Mrs. Fatima, you told the schools using e-learning tools in the future. A lot of countries are planning to reopen schools. Do you think that e-learning is going to stop, or do you think it's going to become one of the core tools used in curriculum delivery? Do you think that students and parents as well as teachers should be ready for this new reality?
That's a really good question. And I think I have two perspectives on this. One is, as a parent, I don't want my kids to be e-learning when they go back in the classroom. Definitely not my 9-year-old son. I want him to go back to school. I want him to be playing football on the field. I want him to be writing with a pencil on a paper. And I want him to be showing those math calculations on a paper. That is my vision for my child, and e-learning has not changed that. I think definitely as they grow up, there's a place for this. And I think that time will come. But for the elementary years, I keep pushing this hands-on experience and the more interaction they have with each other as humans. And I think during this time of social distancing, not only have we as adults realized that we need human interaction and we need each other, but the kids have to. And so I think that the day the school does open and these kids come back to school, we're going to see kids who are more motivated. They want to be there because they don't want to be sat at home in front of a computer. So I think that motivation that will come out of it is different to the computer screens. On the flip side, the amount of professional development that has taken place in teachers on how to use the online platforms to enhance the learning will definitely be taken back into the classroom. I think the other big thing is we've realized that kids can manage their own schedules. And it would be nice to see how we can open up our classroom routines a little bit more to allow onus on kids being able to decide which subject they learn when, rather than controlling it as much as we did. So I think those kind of changes would be more visible at the elementary level, but not having more screen time for sure.
Okay, I think this is all that we have time for this evening. I'd like to thank you guys for coming on for tonight's panel discussion. On behalf of the KSIJ Dar es Salaam Jamaat, the Central Board of Education, as well as the COVID-19 team, I would like to show my sincere appreciation to you guys. And a quick shout out to all the teachers out there. You guys have been amazing over the last 2 months, adapting through this challenge. We need to give ourselves a round of applause. Wherever you are, this goes out to you. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a good night.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Thank
having us
you.
here.